Hello there. I thought I would do a video looking ahead at what the 8 major device manufacturers around e-note-taking devices might be doing toward the spring and the summer. And we'll go through them one by one, focusing on maybe either new releases that have just come out or where we think they're going to have some releases over the next few months. A lot of it will be speculative, because we just don't know until these companies announce what they intend to do. But it's based on, kind of historical averages of what they've done and among other rumors and what have you. So I think this will be a good overview of what to expect over the next few months. I can tell you that we'll be starting off with Bigme and the HiBreak phone, which is an e-ink phone that will also feature color, the first time that we've seen color on an e-ink phone. I think this is probably the most exciting thing that we know about right now in the e-ink consumer electronics world. So we'll start there, but we'll also go through the other companies and see what we know in terms of what they intend to do over the next few months. So I hope you enjoy it. This is just kind of a preview, and it's only based on what we know today, so certainly things may change, but as of right now, these are the latest releases and rumors for each of these companies. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get right on in. So to start the conversation around what's happening with Bigme, we actually need to start with the Boox Palma. Now we'll get to Boox as a company shortly in this video, but I just wanted to start here because the Boox Palma was a device that was released last year. I think the first versions, kind of a limited edition release, happened toward the end of July. That's certainly when the first reviews started to come out. And then it was opened up at some point subsequent to that. And now you can just buy it from their webpage. I think you can buy it from Amazon as well. The key to understand about the Boox Palma, it was a very popular, and remains actually, a popular device. It's a handheld e-ink screen device, and I think of it kind of akin to an iPod Touch. So it doesn't have any cellular connectivity, but it does run, applications from Google Play. It has a touch screen. The only difference is, of course, it's an e-ink screen. So a cool device, and when I use the phrase iPod Touch, I mean that as a compliment, but at the same time, there's a reason why the iPod Touch no longer exists. And frankly, it's because in order for that device to be, useful, at least to a broad audience, you need cellular connectivity, like that you get the iPhone, to continue the analogy. And so a lot of people like the Palma, but there's a lot of interest in that form factor turned into a phone. Boox has not introduced any type of phone, but Bigme has, and they've done so with what they call the HiBreak. And just before we get to that, I just want to highlight a few things. First off, the Palma has a 6.13-inch screen. It also has 6 gigabytes of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage. And that's relevant as we compare that to the specifications of the HiBreak. So let's take a look at that. So earlier in this month, May 2024, Bigme introduced that they were releasing the HiBreak, that it would come out fairly soon. There were very few details. And now a couple weeks later, they're sending details out into the marketplace to kind of get interest. This is basically an email from Bigme, and basically it talks about further details about what to expect in these HiBreak phones. And so that visually, I should point out, looks very similar to the Palma. But as we can see here, the screen size is a little bit smaller at 5.84 inches. Remember, it was 6.13 with the Palma. A color and black and white version. The Palma only came in black and white. So the HiBreak will have a Kaleido 3 color screen as well. They're going to release this in 2 segments. So there's going to be a segment that's going to take place in toward the end of June, and then there'll be a segment that takes place toward the end of the year. The end of June will feature the 6 gigabytes of RAM with 128 gigabytes of storage capacity on Android 11. And then you can see that will include the MTK6765 processor, which is a processor that came out in 2018. I'll show that in a second. And then the end of the year will be the slightly more modern, you could say, versions, which will include the MediaTek Dimensity, which I think came out in 2021. But again, I'll share those details to verify that. And then you can see what the pricing is. So it's still a range. They haven't solidified the pricing. But there'll be a black and white color of the first model coming out, and then there'll be a black and white and color version toward the end of the year in the more modern. My understanding is the modern one will have 5G connectivity, where the more dated one will have 4G connectivity. So that's a critical difference. Now, just to finish off in terms of comparing to the Palma, what we don't see here is we don't know if it'll be waterproof. I don't see that in the description. So the Palma is waterproof, not sure about these devices. The Palma also had a customizable button, so whether it has that functionality or not, we don't know. And there's other questions as well, but those are two things that come to mind based on the Palma itself. So more to come, but it's very exciting. I can tell you that I will be reviewing one of these models, hopefully in June. But we'll see how that goes. So it's very exciting. Let's take a look at those processors just to give a little more sense of how these phones might differ. Okay, so here's the details over the two processors that I talked about. And keep in mind, this is not just relevant for the HiBreak phones, but this is actually going to be relevant over the next couple devices that I'm going to talk about from Bigme and from Pocketbook as well. So we see the older chip is on top. That's the MT6765. It caps at 2.3 gigahertz and it's more performance-based cores, and it was released end of 2018. Down below, you can see the Dimensity 900. I think the chip is the one on top, not the one on the bottom. That's a little bit higher clock speed. It has 2 performance cores at 2.4 gigahertz. And it's the newer chip, having been released in 2021. And there you can see the 5G technology noted there. These chips not only are going to run through the HiBreak, but they're running through some of the Inknote color series devices as well, as we'll talk about in a second. But the Helio chip is the one that will come out at the end of June, and the Dimensity, the one that comes out at the end of the year. So I'm pretty excited to review the HiBreak phone. I know that there's a little bit of concern about the first release, the first wave, if you will, in terms of being Android 11 only. And most people are going to probably want to wait for the Android 14 version. But I think what we're going to learn when the Android 11 comes out is we'll understand, of course, the form factor and the usefulness of the phone. I'm really interested to see how it looks. I'm kind of looking forward just to taking it and walking around the neighborhood, listening to music and how it handles as a phone. So just pretty excited to see the innovation in the space. Bigme is really big on innovation. Sometimes that's a positive thing, sometimes it's a negative thing, but regardless, I appreciate the fact that they're pushing the envelope and trying to see what might work. So I'm looking forward to that, and more to come on that front. So in other Bigme news, Bigme recently released this device, which is the Inknote X Color. And basically it's retailing, you can see that on the image, it's retailing for about it's chopped on the screen, but $669. Couple observations about this particular device. I want to start off with the screen itself. This is one of the things that I kind of wish Bigme didn't do. So this is not what the screen looks like if you're looking at a Kaleido 3 screen. So the colors would not be, this sharp and this vivid. This is what it would look like if you were casting your screen to, from your device to like a TV. So it's not completely inaccurate, but it's not the actual experience that you'd have when looking at the device. And clearly, they're trying to put a bolder picture on it. It's, I know that they're doing that, so it's fine, but it's a little misleading in my mind, and I kind of wish that they didn't do that. But anyway, I digress. But let's focus on this particular device. And I'm going to go down to a table where they compare this to the Inknote Plus. And here it is. You can see that basically the takeaway here, the Inknote Color Plus. The takeaway here is that there's only two differences between the Inknote X Color and the Inknote Color Plus, right? So there's the chip difference, and it's the same, I believe it's the same chips. It doesn't say Dimensity 900 series here, but I suspect that's what it's referring to. And the other chip is exactly as was previously indicated. So the same chips we're talking about with the HiBreak are relevant here. So the Inknote X Color has, the better chip, and it has a more updated version of Android 13 as opposed to 11. So those are the predominant differences. Now the cost difference is somewhat notable. So again, this particular device sells for $669. The Inknote Color Plus can sell on the same website for about $609, and if you go into Amazon, it's a little bit more. It's $619. So if you just take the Amazon price, right, that would be a $50 difference between the two devices. That's a lot. More importantly, the difference between the Inknote Color Plus and the Inknote Color Plus Lite is that the Lite version has 4 gigabytes of RAM as opposed to 6, and has 64 gigabytes of storage instead of 128. And the price of the Lite is $439 on this store, and it's about $480 on Amazon. So let me pause and explain why I'm telling you all this. I don't believe that the value of the additional RAM or the additional storage is really all that useful. It's certainly not useful in my experience of how I use these devices. I have plenty of storage at 64 gigabytes, and I'm never maxing the RAM beyond 4. So my devices never get sluggish and slow down because I just don't have enough RAM. So I think those differences are pretty nominal. So throwing that out, the only difference between the Inknote X Color and the Inknote Color Plus Lite is that processor and is that version of Android. Now clearly that's a superior processor. So that's, there's no doubt in my mind the Inknote X Color will be a better device. I presume it will be a little bit snappier. And then having Android 13, where Android 11 is going to stop being supported, I believe, toward the end of this year. Don't quote me on that, but it was supposed to get about 4 years of support, and it launched in 2020. So that does approximately put it toward the end of 2024. So there is an advantage. I'm not trying to argue that the Inknote X Color is not a good device and isn't superior, but the premium of the X Color versus the Lite is $230. That's a lot. And I am probably not going to review this device because of that. And specifically, the benefits versus the cost just doesn't make any sense to me. I think the Inknote Color Plus Lite is actually a compelling device. And while I would argue that the Boox Note Air 3C is the better device, particularly in the note-taking app, depending on your use case, with the Inknote Lite being cheaper, and you can get it from almost $440 here from Bigme, although you may want to go with Amazon because they have better return policies and that sort of thing. But still, it's worth considering. I just don't know that the Inknote X Color, it is worth considering simply because of the price point. That's really the thing that's a sticking point for me. And I have to be very selective as I go through and decide which devices to review, because for the most part, and there's a couple exceptions, but for the most part, I pay out of pocket for my devices. And I just think that price differential, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So there is this new device that's out, but I probably won't be reviewing it, but I just thought it was worth talking about in this video. And this actually has a lot of similarity to another device which is being released by Pocketbook. So let's shift our attention away from Bigme to Pocketbook and see what's going on there. So Pocketbook has announced the Pocketbook InkPad EO, and this is a follow-up. They released their first 10-inch e-note-taking device earlier in the year, or maybe it was even at the end of last year, I'm not sure, called the InkPad X Pro. That's a device I did review. And I had a lot of reservations about that particular device. They're taking another shot at it. I think this will be a better shot, but I still have some concerns. I think what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through this promotional video that's going to go on for about a minute, and I'll pause it at various points to make some observations, and then I'll kind of tell you the big picture of this device. And it's very much in a similar vein to what we just talked about with Bigme and the Inknote X color. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so they're talking about 10.3-inch screen, color, and Kaleido 3, of course. And they mean 50% higher resolution relative to the previous version of Kaleido called Kaleido Plus. So that's what that's referring to. Of course, it takes notes. Commenting on book pages is not unusual. That's something that pretty much all these e-ink devices can do if you import the document onto your device and it's not protected. So that's the key. Although there is a feature on Bigme devices called global handwriting, and that does allow you to write on what would otherwise be protected documents. And the way they get around that is you end up doing your writing and you create an image and it puts it into a separate notebook, and then you can, that notebook, gathers all the pages that you've written on. So it's kind of a workaround, but I like it. I think it's a nice feature. I don't know if this device has that feature or not. Let's take a look here. Okay, so sorry, unfortunately this window comes up. Oh, maybe I can X out. Oh, beautiful. Okay, so this is one of the interesting things. So it looks like Pocketbook has come in and added a different skin or at least look to the icons that is otherwise a Bigme device, and I'll get to that specifically. But if you look, for example, this kind of pen tray off to the side is very much how Bigme's software currently works on their e-ink series. The color palette it looks a little different, but it has the same kind of pen types. The icons above are very similar again to Bigme's current, but they just look different, and they made it a little bit. I think they made it a little bit nicer, actually. I kind of like what they've done visually with these, but it definitely is a layer on top of a UI that we're very, very familiar with. The one thing I find particularly concerning about this page is that one of the things I love about the Bigme devices in the note-taking app is their highlighter feature. Generally speaking, I think Bigme's note-taking app isn't as sophisticated as competitors, particularly like a Boox, for example. But their highlighting feature almost makes me not care in some cases, particularly if I'm doing kind of simple note-taking. I really like what Bigme did with a highlighter. Well, there's no highlighter here. They have a pencil, a brush, a ball pen, which is great, but then they have a marker. And the difference, by the way, is that markers are kind of like a highlighter, but they're much more foggy. So in the Bigme device, if I do a highlighter, the highlight basically goes behind the writing, which is really cool. With a marker, it's kind of in between. So it looks like they didn't pick that particular piece of the Bigme UI, which is a little disappointing. But everything else looks very much the same. Let's keep going and see what we have here. Okay, so exporting to PDF, PNG, or email with a share option. This is exactly how Bigme is currently set up. So no surprises there. I think they have QR codes as well when they use camera, as usual.
I'd seen little of Holmes lately.
Bluetooth is unusual. Okay, very good. All right, so having gone through that, let's go back to our previous conversations around the Bigme devices. And I talked about the Bigme Inknote Color Plus Lite, right? Now, they're a little pithy on the details here on the Pocketbook website, but as far as I could kind of gather, it looks like that the Pocketbook is using the same specifications as the Inknote Color Plus Lite. It appears to be using the same chip. That's that MTK 6765 chip. Certainly has 4 gigabytes of RAM, 64 gigabytes of storage, exact same as the Lite. It's using Android 11, exactly as the Lite. It's very similar, of course, the casing, although it goes with a dark theme, or the Lite has a lighter theme. This feels very much like the Inknote Color Plus Lite, which is a great thing. I think that device is probably one of Bigme's most compelling devices along its Inknote line, but it's partly what makes it compelling is its price point. Again, the Inknote Lite is $439 on the Bigme store. I think it's the VIP. It's something. What's the name of it? Store.bigme.vip or something like that. Amazon again is more expensive, but better return policies. That's $480. The Pocketbook is not widely available, particularly in the United States, but I saw that it was selling for 569 euros. That's the equivalent roughly of about almost $620. On Amazon, you could get copies at 503 pounds. That's the equivalent of about $638. For a device that you can get much cheaper elsewhere, I don't know if that's worth it. Now, there's a caveat here, which is if there's been more changes beyond just kind of that surface iconography that looks nice on this device, if there's other fundamental changes, then there might be a compelling reason why that device is superior to the Lite. But right now, it just looks like a reskinned Lite, which I can get for a much cheaper price. So again, we run into this same problem where it's probably a good device. I'm not saying anything negative about the device. I'm saying something negative about the device at its price point. And for that reason, this is probably going to be in lieu of learning more. And I don't see anything in their descriptions that suggests that there's anything revolutionary beyond what the Lite can do with this Pocketbook InkPad EO. So unfortunately, this will be another device that I'm probably going to pass on doing any type of review. So far through this video, I've kind of mentioned a couple devices that I don't have any interest in reviewing. And I want to take a moment to pause to talk about that thought process and, just so you can see where I'm coming from, but also why that might be relevant for you. So a couple things. First off, as I'm thinking through my channel and what I'm going to review, I do have a limited budget. I mean, that really should be called out. It does cost me more money to produce the channel than I take in, which is fine. I'm certainly not complaining about that. I know what I'm signing up for, but that does limit how much money I can spend on these devices. So I have to be thoughtful about which devices I review and which devices I don't review. So that's one thing to consider. But the other thing that may be more relevant and interesting is that I want to review a device that I feel like has a chance to be something significant in the marketplace, to potentially be a leader in some way, or to bring something new to the table. That's anytime I decide to review something, that's something that I'm thinking about in terms of the device I'm about to review. But if I have a device that I don't feel necessarily has something like that, then I'm just not interested in reviewing it. I mean, I just want to give every device I review a chance to be successful. And if I don't think that there is an opportunity there, then I'm just not interested in doing the review. So the reason why that's relevant for you is that if I'm not reviewing something, that probably means because I think there's something else out there that already does everything that device can do and probably does it at a lower price point. And that was certainly the example that we just went through in the two previous devices. So that's basically my philosophy about reviewing things. So I just want to go into every device thinking, well, maybe there's something about this device that could be special. It may turn out there isn't, and I'll say that in my review. But I don't want to do a review of a device that I just don't see where that potential lies. So hopefully that makes sense and kind of puts into context, why I'm picking certain devices over others to review. If you have any questions about that, please let me know and put that in the comments, and I'll be sure to answer. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so let's talk really briefly about Boox. It's kind of amazing to say this, but there's really been nothing released by Boox since they've released the Note Air 3, the black and white version of their latest 10-inch device, and which is incredible because 2023 was all about Boox releasing too much stuff. There was a lot of criticism that they took because they had released so many devices, and probably most poignantly, they released the Tab Ultra C, and then 6 months later replaced it with the Tab Ultra C Pro. So that was, I think, kind of jumping the shark almost for a lot of people. And Boox quite wisely calmed things down and really hasn't released much of anything this year. Now, if you go to their store, and that's what we have displayed here, and you filter on just the current devices that you can purchase, there's only one device on that list that is on sale. It's the Tab Mini C. And that device actually has been on sale for a while now. So why am I telling you this? Well, sometimes this is a good precursor in terms of what Boox is about to release. It's not a perfect leading indicator at all, but this certainly implies that we'll see an announcement soon about a replacement for the Tab Mini C, whether it's a Tab Mini C2 or it's a different device, but it's also a 7.8-inch color e-reader. Something is going to probably replace this. And another reason to think that it might be soon is that the original Mini C was released at the very end of June of last year, and we are coming up on that point. So definitely possible that we'll see that. What else might we see from Boox? We don't know. Usually with Boox, you just don't know until they make an announcement, or they'll send a teaser, and then a few weeks later, they'll say what's going to happen. Some speculative things, maybe they'll come up with their own phone. Since Bigme is doing that, it's possible they'll do that. You could have a color Palma is a potential option. Who knows? You'll definitely hear from Boox in the fall. Not quite sure to what degree we're going to be hearing from them with new devices. I think the leading candidate is a successor to the Tab Mini C, but there might be one or two other things announced by Boox as well. We don't know at this point. We'll just have to wait and see. So Supernote is generally predictable in terms of what it plans to release next and when, although the exact timing always seems to be in flux. And the big news with Supernote, remember they released the A6X2, which was around toward the end of December of last year, with the idea that the A5X2 would be releasing shortly thereafter. Well, I'm sharing on the screen some posts that indicate significant delays potentially to that. So I first came across this issue on a post from Fresh Melon Pan that basically said, "Ooh, it looks like it's going to be delayed until actually after Christmas," and you can actually see a response there, kind of an opaque response by someone from Supernote, and that was in relation to this posting, which was originally posted by Dominic Stefan. And basically, the same individual from Supernote said, if you see in the second bullet, if you believe the Nomad size is too small for your needs, you may choose to wait for the A5X2 to be released. It should come before Christmas this year. So it looks like we're going to have a significant delay on this particular device. It's interesting. You get two camps from that. You get some folks that, on Reddit that say, "Oh, well, it's great, it's worth the wait, we'll wait whatever it takes." And then you get these people like, "I want it now, how come it's not out now?" And that sort of thing. So, where I stand on it is that, obviously, what are you going to do? It's going to come when it comes. But hopefully, the reason behind the delay, and we're completely speculative in saying this, we don't know why it's taking so long. There are rumors that it might be related to production issues. I've heard, for example, one rumor that it was the back of the crystal casing was having some production issues. I'm not sure I believe that, but that is certainly one thing out there. My hope would be that extensive time is because they want to do additional changes from what we saw with the Nomad. Because really, at this point, we're well past COVID. I know production issues can still be a thing. That's not like that's impossible, but to have that type of delay to Christmas really implies some significant things. And again, given that the Nomad's coming out, we know that the UI is fine. I mean, the Nomad has a couple issues, but they're pretty minor. So hopefully it's possible that they're looking at making a couple additional significant changes and are just working those things out. If that's true, then I'm with the camp of folks to say we'll wait and see what take all the time you need to figure it out. Regardless, what we know for a fact, or we think we know for a fact, is we're not going to be hearing anything new from Supernote in terms of new releases this spring or summer, and maybe not even in the fall. So we'll have to see. Okay, so our attention now turns to Kobo. And Kobo, of course, has just released 2 new devices that have e-ink color. One of them is just an e-reader, so I don't generally cover e-reader, so I won't comment on that. I literally just, posted my review of the Kobo Libra Color. So it looks like that's probably what we'll expect to see from Kobo in the spring and the summer. There is one open question about whether there'll be a color version of the Kobo Ellipsa 2e released. And I don't have any particular insight or rumors in that regard, but it certainly sounds plausible to me. I think the Kobo Libra Color has been actually a really hotly desired device. There's a lot of attention being put to it. And so I have to think that because of that reaction, that there's the potential for, a 10-inch e-ink device with color to be released by Kobo. But there's been no announcement so far, and I don't think that's going to happen during the summer. If it does happen, it probably is more likely to happen in the fall. Now, I'm just speculating in that regard, but that's kind of where I think we're headed, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens. So our attention turns to Mobiscribe, and Mobiscribe has either just released or is about to release a difference in their color variant on the Mobiscribe Wave. Now, the Wave was released, I think it was last year, and with 2 versions, a black and white version. That version I've reviewed and I have videos on. And that's the version that is what I think is the best entry-level e-note-taking device. And let me clarify specifically what I mean by that. And then there was a color version, which was Kaleido Plus. So it looks like they're now releasing a Kaleido 3 version that will supplement that Kaleido Plus version. So it says here, coming soon and sold out. I think they haven't released it yet, but you are starting to see some reviews come out on the device. And so far, it looks like what you would expect it to be, which is basically a color version of the black and white one. Now, I do, again, call this my best entry-level device, but I want to make sure that's framed properly. If you own a Bigme or a Boox device, or if you're focused on note-taking and you have a Supernote and a Remarkable device, you really would not be interested in the Mobiscribe devices. The Mobiscribe devices really, in my mind, are for people who have e-readers. They love e-readers. They're kind of curious about moving into the note-taking space, but they don't want to spend a lot of money, right? They just want to kind of dip their foot in the pool, if you will. And for that purpose, for people kind of moving up from an e-reader to an e-note-taking device, that's the people, I think, that would really be interested in the Mobiscribe device. It has, Google Play, just like Boox and Bigme devices do, so you have access to all your reading stores. It has a pretty relatively sophisticated note-taking app, certainly more than I would expect at that price category. It's not as complicated as Boox, but it is more complicated and sophisticated than Bigme, so it's kind of in the middle there. The reason why I call it entry level ultimately is because it's not as responsive and as snappy as some of the nicer devices in this marketplace. Now, it's still ultimately responsive. It just takes a beat sometimes when you click on the system screens for something to happen. And it's a small thing, but when you're used to having devices that are snappier, it would feel like a downgrade. But if you're coming from e-ink readers, and this is your first note-taking experience, I think you would just adjust to it and it would be fine. And that's why I'd really think it just fits nicely in the marketplace to bridge the gap between the premium note-taking devices and folks who are just in the e-reader space. That's what I really like about Mobiscribe. Okay, so putting all that context aside, I'm a little bit dubious about the Kaleido 3 version. It's not like there's any problem with it. It's kind of similar to the other devices we've talked about. It's the price point. Now, maybe this isn't as an extreme as our previous examples with Bigme and Pocketbook, but at $340, the entry level kind of nature of that starts to be a weaker argument because you're, going back, of course, to the Boox device, which we saw earlier. It's on sale for $400. So you're now, and that's a premium device. You can get a Bigme device for a little bit cheaper than that. That's the X6 Color Plus Lite. And this is at $340. So it does have color, and it is a little bit cheaper, but that gap is narrowing. And you're asking these people over here who are kind of in the e-reader space, who are moving into the note-taking space. It's now becoming a bigger jump. Again, I don't have any particular concerns with the device. I think it's just going to be a color version of the black and white version of this Wave series, which isn't a bad thing. I'm just starting to think that the pricing is going to start to play more of a factor, and that's where I'm a little bit curious about it. I don't plan to review this device. Certainly, if Mobiscribe loaned me a copy to review, I would be more than happy to review it. That doesn't seem to be in the cards, so I probably won't be reviewing this again because of that pricing reason, and because of my general philosophy, my budget, but also my general philosophy around what I review and why. I'm not seeing the value add necessarily of this particular device like I saw with the black and white variant. That's just my opinion, but that's where we are with Mobiscribe, and this is definitely representing what they're going to be doing in the next, probably maybe this year. I don't know if we're going to see another device released by Mobiscribe this year. This could very well be all that we see. It's not clear what's going to happen with the Amazon Kindle as it relates to color. I have to believe that because Kobo has released a color e-reading device, that's inevitable that Kindle will as well. So I would expect perhaps an announcement toward the end of the year about that. There has been a rumor that Kindle will release an e-ink device with color, but that color would be Gallery 3. Kind of an interesting rumor. There's some folks that think that maybe instead of Gallery 3, what they really meant to say was Kaleido 3. Because Gallery 3 has been only released on one device thus far. That device has been discontinued. And it clearly demonstrated that Gallery 3 was not ready for prime time. So certainly you wouldn't expect a Kindle device rather, to have that. Having said that, that was 2 years ago since the announcement of Gallery 3 was made. And has there been significant advances in the technology around this advanced e-color paper tech? Possibly. We just don't know. So we expect something from Amazon later in the year as it relates to color. Maybe it's an updated version of Gallery 3, more likely Kaleido 3, we just don't know. Well, we certainly, we know even less about, I suppose, is whether there'll be a scribe version in color as well. There's been no rumors that I'm aware of around that, and certainly no announcement. So Kindle right now is very silent. But given that Kobo has made the move toward color, you have to imagine that the Kindle might make some moves as well. But in the note-taking space, we just don't know. So time will tell. The last company I want to talk about is Remarkable. And really, there's no rumors floating out there. There's a vague rumor that there might be a new Remarkable toward the end of the year. It's certainly possible when you consider that the current Remarkable is approaching its 4-year anniversary. So that seems, it's not unreasonable to think that an updated version of the device will be coming, but we don't know that. And whether that device includes color or not, there's just very little information coming out right now on the Remarkable. I don't think we're going to see anything in the spring or summertime. If we do see anything, it'll be like in the fall, much like a lot of other companies. So very quiet, Remarkable summer is what I expect. Okay, that's your spring and summer preview. If there's any other rumors out there that you've heard, please post those in the comments. I think those will be interesting. But I think we'll have a little bit more activity over the next few months than we've seen so far this year. It's pretty much been a quiet year, generally speaking, overall, so far. So it's time to get a little bit of activity. Of course, I think that it's the fall months where we're going to see a lot of the really big releases for 2024. But I still think there's some surprises in store for us in the summer. And we know, of course, about the HiBreak phone, but I kind of suspect that one or two things might pop up during the summer months as well, and we'll just have to wait and see what those are. I've given my best guesses, but as usual, you can predict the future, but only with a certain amount of accuracy. So this is the best prediction as of today, but what happens tomorrow, I think, will probably be different. Just a question of how. All right, if there's any comments or questions, put those in the chat. I'll be sure to respond to those. Otherwise, hope you have a great day.